Hello and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. I sort of promised to do this, so I'm making good with the promise. Once again, looking at my computer, I'm just going blank with trying to put together a sentence without having those pregnant pauses. It's very hard to do this unscripted, but it's not worth going through the whole rigmarole of making a script because this is really all a little trite. In any case, I have made one video that concentrated on some comments made by Rob Llewellyn from the Fully Charged show in relation to this London's Calling, It's Almost Breaking News video, which is the source today of the last bit of my having a bit of a roast of Rob Llewellyn. A little diversion from my usual Aptera criticisms. People that are fanboys of Aptera always accuse me of only criticising Aptera, so if anything, this is just something to break that mould just once. Anyway, there won't be too much on this. Let's see, what is it? I'm going to try and...
Hello?
I can't see a timestamp, so I think it was something close to 40 minutes long. I won't be taking too much time. Just some minor examples of things that I just don't see as being worthy of even making mention of. Well, better you understand after you see what I have to say than try to figure out what I'm trying to say now. So I'll move on.
And welcome to another episode of Almost Breaking News. I'm Robert Llewellyn, the founder and one of the presenters of the Fully Charged show and the Everything Electric show. And now we've just finished our live event in Australia a couple of weekends ago, and the Everything Electric show in Sydney was, and I'm trying to be as modest as I can, an unbelievable success. Where I am at the moment recording this is very egalitarian from the point of view of Sydney-siders and Melbourneites, because I'm right in between the two. I'm in a little town called Albury. Albury Wodonga is the full town. It's right on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. It's very lovely. We're having a little break here. So it was a great success. Enormous interest in electric vehicles. We did thousands of test drives, loads of interest in renewable energy. Loads of people have already got solar on their roofs. Everywhere I can see around this suburb, there's solar on all the roofs. It's just what people do in Australia. It's normal. So this isn't a little micro niche area of technology. It's central. It's critically important. It's global. And it's growing at a dizzying speed. It also counters, once again, the very misleading stories we've seen recently about a decline in the sale of electric vehicles. Yeah.
Okay. Time I chipped in with a few little comments. First of all, when he said they had thousands of test drives, it might have just got into the low thousands, but the way he says it, it makes you think there were many thousands. If you look further on, they talk about Hyundai doing a maximum of 245, I think it was, somewhere around there, a day for 3 days. So they didn't get up to 1,000, and they were probably the largest one that gave test drives. There were a few others. Audi probably did maybe as many. I doubt it, but call it close. And then Peugeot and a few others. But the test drives were really Mickey Mouse, and he doesn't tell you that. I took a Hyundai Ioniq 5N out, and with such a high-performance vehicle, I was relegated to, at best, 60 kilometres an hour for the short circuit that I was on. But for the largest component of that circuit, it was 30 kilometres an hour. How can you test drive a high-performance car when most of your time you spent under 30 k's an hour? Because you worry that the police have set up to catch everybody that are doing test drives. Our police in Australia are very, very diligent, and just worrying that there was some radar behind a tree or in a wheelie bin or something made you stick to that speed limit and ruined the test drive. But EV take-up is not at an alarming rate. It never has. We are still under 10% of new cars sold, and nobody's alarmed at that. We're actually quite behind the rest of the world, mostly because things like Volkswagen don't even have any EVs for sale at the moment. You've had ID3s and ID4s and possibly ID7s and all sorts of things, the bus. You've had all sorts around the world for a long time. The Honda E has been an EV had by the rest of the world for a very long time. And yet in Australia, there's never been a Honda E for sale in a Honda dealership ever. This is Australia not taking up electric vehicles at an alarming rate. It's not only because the people aren't too interested, it's because the dealerships aren't interested. And this is the reality. He, I guess, masks what is real and puts his own spin on it. I'll look for some more.
Hundreds of stories. Now, this might sound a little bit corporate. We offer our audience of existing and potentially new EV buyers a convenient multi-brand test drive in a single day. They could drive loads of different makes of different cars, and all within a non-confrontational, independent and supportive environment. But don't believe me. Let's have a quick look at what some of the people who attended the event thought about it.
We are on the Hyundai stand. We're here with
John Kett, COO Hyundai Motor Company Australia.
John. Tell us about your experience of the show this weekend.
It's been amazing. I think from a pure test drive perspective, I think the maximum test drives we could run was about 218, and we've maxed out every day. So actually 248. We've maxed out every day.
It's been really fun taking people out for test drives. The route here is really, it's excellent for actually testing out the modes of the car.
That last one. The route is excellent for testing out the modes of the car. 30 miles per hour for most of the whole 10, 15 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long it went. It wasn't long. 30 miles an hour. How's that excellent for testing out the routes of the car? And have a look at if you look at the original video, have a look at the crowds behind these people every time they're saying it's buzzing, it's flat out. I can't see anybody, and half of what you see in the crowds are probably the staff that are in the show. Certainly, almost all of the people he's interviewed are staff.
And so the event's been fabulous from every perspective, from our perspective and from all of the exhibitors here today.
Now, one of the things we all became very aware of during the event was how fast electric vehicle sales were growing here, and how many people who were not in a position to buy or lease a new car, it's an expensive thing to do, were very interested in what was on offer and very excited about the possibility of a larger second-hand market growing here. This is in stark contrast to the endless stories about a drop in sales of EVs around the world and how nobody wants electric cars.
How can interest be in stark contrast to actual results? I just don't understand that at all. He's saying that people were interested in an upcoming used EV market, and that is in stark contrast in used prices dropping around the world. You're comparing chalk and cheese there.
Naturally, the traditional press pounce on this minute sales reduction with fanatical glee. They hopelessly fail to analyse what is really going on, and we've seen it happen in real time.
It's interesting because shortly after this, I actually saw somebody talking about New Zealand and how the EV sales had dropped off so much that BYD was even considering dropping out of New Zealand altogether. So while he's making these unsubstantiated suggestions that all is going great, I think if you actually test the background, truth is nothing similar to his claims.
There's no question that some companies are seeing minor drops or mere flatlining in sales of their EVs, but that is because they are now cheaper, and in some cases, we have to accept it, better vehicles coming in from China and Korea that are gaining market share all the time. I mean, sales of electric cars are growing in all major countries around the world. Some countries faster than others, but it is global, it is massive, and it is not going to stop.
Well, we don't know about that. If we look at actual figures, facts and figures, all we can say is that he's gossiping, and he might even be lying. This is what I don't like about people with their own barrow to push. They're just clever at misrepresenting. And as I say, I'll leave it at we don't know. But I think if you're going to be making claims, I think the knowledge should be there first. I don't think he even knows. When he says it's a temporary glitch or a change and pretty soon things will skyrocket, I don't know where he's getting his facts from.
Certain brands are going to fail and fall behind as they cling desperately to fossil-burning hybrids. And of course, some people will buy old-fashioned cars like that, and that's fine.
I think in the case of Volkswagen, I think they're actually thinking of getting out of the EV market because it's the EV market in their operations that is failing and falling behind, and their fossil fuel sales are doing quite well. I just think he's a little distorted. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. Is Volkswagen surviving on their ICE vehicles and struggling to sell EVs, or is the EV side of things pulling the heavy load? Can Volkswagen compete in the EV market? Who has some facts?
Who cares? I don't. However, in contrast to the desperate claims that EV sales are dropping, we hear very intriguing news coming out of Ford, which, let's face it, is one of the oldest legacy car companies on the planet with an incredible history of mass-producing cars from the get-go. Their
history is all about mass-producing ICE cars. He's transferring that onto them being capable of mass-producing EVs, when it's not the case. He also uses emotive words like desperate, and he, as I said in the earlier video, he does things like saying, I don't care. Well, really, I don't care what he says. I think he's somewhat of a child in the way he approaches things. As for Ford, and this is only rumour, I wouldn't attempt to fight his gossip with real facts. I don't need to. I'll just let people research and find out for himself. But I have a funny feeling that when Ford sells the F-150 and the Mustang, they lose tens of thousands on each one. And it's their desperation in trying to get into an EV market that they know is the only way of the future long term. And yet they're incompetent in what they do. They can't just bring out the F-150 and the Mustang, the E-Mustang, to stand on their own merits and to make a profit for Ford. They are caught between a rock and a hard place, and yet Rob will not reveal that to you. Now, I've fought gossip with gossip, and that'll do me.
There have been reports about the reductions in sales of the two electric cars Ford offer right now, the Mustang Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning. If that was remotely true, it would be quite depressing. But the thing is, they're actually selling thousands of these cars every week. In 2023, Ford sold a record number of F-150 Lightnings. They sold more pickup trucks than Rivian. And the Rivian is not doing badly. The Mustang was the second best-selling electric vehicle in America after the Tesla Model Y.
The Mustang might have been the second best-selling EV in America, but you've got to factor in that China is pretty much barred from even competing. Had BYD been there, I think BYD might have even overtaken Tesla, like it has around the world. But the other thing is, the elephant in the room is that while they sold too many of these vehicles, they lost tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle, and they are hemorrhaging. You can bring out a product that cost you $100,000 to make, and you can make it sell well if you make it only $60,000, because people see value in that, and therein lies the sales success. But sales isn't all that matters to a company. It's profitability. and they are hemorrhaging. Rob does not paint a complete picture.
That has not been reported in the general press. The Ford E-Transit was the best-selling electric van in the USA in 2023. All the moves of multi-billion-dollar companies around the world who are investing massive chunks of cash in new manufacturing facilities aren't doing this to look green. They are doing it because they can see the way the market is moving.
I'll go back to that. Legacy automakers are moving to EVs because they can see the way the market is moving. I don't believe it's purely the way the market is moving, only after the fact that it's the way the government is forcing the market. Governments, and he knows about it, he's all happy about the new government promising now to return the once by 2030 mandate that went out to 2035 back to 2030. These mandates are what really make legacy automakers move. They know that if the government says there can be no ICE cars sold after 2030, there's no point in making an ICE car. And the market goes, if the government's saying there's no ICE cars sold after 2030, I had better make my next car an EV. It makes common sense to do so. They don't want to be stuck with something that is obsolete. And even though they buy new cars, many of them want to keep them for quite a number of years. They don't want at sale time to find out they've got an ICE car that governments may find or may make extremely difficult to sell. They may tax the sale of second-hand ICE cars. Who knows what the government is doing? Once again, he pushes this barrow just on the, I don't know, how can you say it? The one thing, legacy automakers are seeing which way the market is going. But when you look deeper into it, there's a lot of reason why the market is going that way. And he doesn't reveal that. He doesn't reveal that the market is responding to influences that are inevitable, that they can't change. I guess just like Aptera fans, this guy appeals to the gullible.
Not a niche upper middle class product, that is proper down in the weeds mass market. And just to bury the fossil fantasy that electric vehicle sales are dropping, the millionth EV was sold in the UK in January, and all the analysts and observers of the market are predicting the next million will be sold in the next 18 months. And just a little reminder as to why this might be a good thing. All these fancy electric cars for these fancy middle class virtue signalers and all that nonsense. The Verge have run an article about a new report from the American Lung Association. What do they know about children and breathing? They're scientists. I don't trust them.
You gotta get your doubts up when he does something like that. This is once again being a 6-year-old. And what do they know about breathing? They know a lot about breathing, but what do they know about the fossil fuel and EV industries?
Anyway, the report highlights the particular advantages for children, especially those vulnerable to respiratory illness, of a reduction of toxic tailpipe emissions. This report is based on a model in which all new vehicles sold by 2035 have zero tailpipe emissions. Now, pretty obviously, that's unlikely to happen. But the group concludes that if it did, there would be 2.7 million fewer asthma attacks among children in the United States of America, as well.
I'm not denying that turning to EV doesn't improve the rate of children getting asthma. It doesn't lower it. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that if that is a correct prediction, then why not target reducing emissions from industry, which is 60% compared to roughly 3% of private cars? If they target 60%, then that must be 20 times more effective. So whatever number of children are not going to get asthma, you could have 20 times that many more if he was just to target the bigger problem. 20 times more. This is my point. And this is something he ignores. He's only showing figures that will push his barrow. Now, when it comes to road transport, the trucks and the buses and the heavy machinery that are out there, they're providing that other 37%. In my comments, I kept saying 47. I've got it right now. That other 37%. So we've got about 3 and we've got about 37% for other road users. And then we have 60% for industry. The last two in total is 97%. He could attack those 97% and leave the 3% alone completely, and then still have a magnificent improvement in the reduction in children's lung asthmas. But that other 97% is not his barrow, and so he fails to mention it. He omits it. He is leading you down his path, and this is what I don't like.
There's 147,000 fewer cases of acute bronchitis. It is really serious. Breathing in tailpipe emissions is not good for you. Children's bodies develop at different rates to adults. This was said by Laura Kate Bender, National Assistant Vice President for Healthy Air at the American Lung Association. Kids are at a greater risk of pollution. Their lungs are still growing, she said in an interview. That's kind of obvious when you think about it. It put me in the ER more often than I think my parents would have liked. You don't say. I would not enjoy taking my children to the ER every time there's a lot of air pollution because they breathe it in and they've got a horrible asthma attack. And we know of cases, and there's a very well-known one in the United Kingdom, where a young child died as a result of really severe traffic pollution. And while I'm on the topic, there are 2 countries on the planet who don't have any tailpipe emissions regulations. Those 2 countries are Russia and Australia. Just saying it because I can actually just about breathe it now. I can sense those lovely diesel and petrol toxicity fumes going on around me.